right, welcome everyone that is joining us. We'll continue to admit folks and we'll get started in just a minute. All right. It's a little past 6, so we can go ahead and get started and people can join as they make their way to the call. Thank you to everyone that is joining us today. A huge thank you to our participants that are joining us virtually. My name is Brock Cabot, and I am the Director of Young Alumni Engagement at UCR. And we're really excited to be having this Industry Insights virtual event with you all today. And so our Industry Insights is a great virtual series that we are able to bring our alumni and current students into a number of different industries and learning about different things that are happening in different careers, and even bringing career tips to folks. And so today, we're excited to be hosting Creativity and Sustainability. We are based out of the Alumni Association, and so we're really hoping that you're able to get a lot of enjoyment out of this series, but beyond that, even a lot of the other things that we have to offer. If you're not an Alumni Association member, we really encourage it. It gets you access to a number of different perks and a lot of different opportunities. And so beyond that, we also have a number of different networks, regional-based and identity-based, that you can get involved with. At a very minimum, we're excited to have you here today joining us for this virtual series. Beyond this Industry Insights, we've also had a number of Highlander Welcome sessions, and I've been able to transition a lot of our other events virtually for the time being. Normally, we'd love to be able to have some of these Industry Insight events in person. However, for now, we've been able to make that transition to virtual, which has been really exciting because we've been able to access a lot of different alumni and students and be able to provide these opportunities to folks beyond what we've been able to do in the past. And so I'm really excited to have you all join us today. A little rundown of today. We'll give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves in a second, and then we'll dive into some of our predetermined questions. However, we want to hear from you as well. And so there is a chat feature at the bottom of Zoom, if you're not familiar with it, that you can submit your questions to us throughout the session. And so any questions that you have, you can go ahead and submit those at the bottom, and we'll be fielding those and hopefully getting to as many of them as possible towards the end. And so anytime throughout the session, you can submit those down below. The session will be recorded, and we'll be sharing it sometime after the session today for all of our folks. If there's someone you want to share it with that maybe wasn't able to make it, or if there's something you really wish you would have remembered, you'll be able to access it after the fact. I really want to thank our panelists for joining us today. We've got a really great mix of folks that are doing some really great things in the sustainability field, whether it's personally or in their profession. And so without further ado, I will go ahead and offer our panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. And Eric, do you want to go ahead and start for us?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Eric. I'm really excited to be reconnecting with UCR alum and students graduating class of 2017. So my background is I'm a marketing and social media content manager consultant. So I've worked with clients, big and small, Fortune 500 companies, worked in advertising for a bit. After graduating, moved to New York to pursue my master's, and it wasn't until I was pursuing my master's that I really started developing an interest in sustainability. And most currently, I am the co-founder of the Water Boys. So we're a reusable water bottle rental service based in Brooklyn, New York. And pretty much our mantra is we're really trying to reduce plastic consumption and trying to make drinking water more sustainable. And so our service is enabled through smartphone devices. So think about, you know, commuting on a day to work, right? And you want to buy a water bottle, but all you see is plastic water bottle. Ideally, our service would, you know, eliminate that plastic barrier, and you would check out our bottle, and they're pre-filled reusable water bottles. And I'll explain a little bit more as we get further into questions, but super excited to be talking to you all today.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. And we're really excited to have you here and to learn more about Water Boys and kind of your journey there. Julie, would you like to go next?
Sorry, I just needed to unmute.
You're totally fine.
Hi, okay, so my name is Dr. Julie Ryan. I am the owner and creator of Dissertation Soap. I'm a 2019 alumni, so pretty recent. I finished my PhD in environmental science, soil and water chemistry. And during grad school, I started a soap company. Just started off as a small Etsy shop, kind of a side project, but I used dissertation pages to wrap my soap, and I named my soap company Dissertation Soap because of it. And my real focus was on sustainability, reuse, reduce. That was like my mantra to everyone. And really what I would like to do is to educate everyone on bath and beauty products and try to get them to switch over one product at a time to more sustainable options that are biodegradable, better for our water systems. Here in Riverside, everything discharges to a local river, the Santa Ana River. So one of my mottos is, you know, making a difference just one shower at a time. But I'm excited to be here. I love being part of the alumni. I'm so proud to be a UCR graduate and would encourage anybody. So if anyone wants to contact me after the conference, please feel free to if you have any questions.
Great, thanks, Julie. I really use the dissertation pages, absolutely. All right, Macy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you so much for having me as a panelist. I'm a 2005 UCR alum, and currently I'm also an education abroad advisor at UCR since 2014. And I'm also an abstract artist. I specialize in acrylic and mixed media, where I'm using a lot of recycled materials, mostly plastics, like grocery bags, that I weave into my work. And while I'm not exactly in a profession where I'm in sustainability, but as an artist, I am on a mission to create an awareness of pretty much our society's dependence on plastics, and really the devastation that they and other single-use products are bringing to our world's oceans, the food chain, and ultimately to our very own bodies. And so through my work, I really do hope to encourage a discussion, a dialogue of the absolute need to change the way that we consume and produce plastics.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Macy. And Maya, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. And apologies all for not being able to join you visually. My name is Maya, and I'm a graduate of 05, and my degree was in environmental science. And I'm the former director of sustainability at Kilroy Realty. So my profession has been sustainability in the corporate space, but personally I've always been very interested in environmental justice advocacy. And so I spend my days working on how do we make corporate entities more responsible for their constituents, all their constituents, tenants, employees, as well as community stakeholders, but also how do we go back and start to undo some of the harm that was done previously. I think you definitely have to be creative to start doing this work, and you have to be willing and able to be a disruptor. And so being as creative as possible and, getting people on board is necessary.
Great, thanks, Maya. And I think that's some really great insight right there, which kind of dives us right into our very first question of telling us about the impact that you've all made on the community through your work. And so you've all been able to do some really great things in different fields. And so you touched on it so far, but can dive in a little deeper about, the impact you've been able to make. How did you get there? Julie, how did you come up with Dissertation Soap and all of that? So I guess, Julie, let's start with you and hear more about Dissertation Soap and the impact that that's made on the community and kind of how you came up with that idea.
Okay, the spotlight's on. Well, as I said before, I really wanted to encourage people to use all natural products because they're better for the environment. But a lot of it was actually educating people on packaging. So I really like that the two other hosts here, they focus on environmental sustainability through reduce of plastic, because that's also something, a goal for my company, you know, to switch over to using recyclable containers that have a lower footprint, take out plastic out of the equation. I make something like shampoo bars, where it's a solid bar of soap. You can use it instead of shampoo, and you can eliminate like 5 bottles of plastic just by switching over to one shampoo bar that will last you months and is better for you, better for the environment too. So a lot of what I do is education, trying to educate my customers. I put on classes. I do STEM-based workshops where I teach people how to make products. But during that, I also talk to them about water quality, sustainability, soil health. I always joke that it's like I have this soap company just so that I can talk to them about water quality. But it's really like a platform that I can use to educate. I think a lot of companies shy away from the use of talking about plastics or talking about their packaging. They know that it's not good for the environment when they overuse plastics, and they know nobody wants to talk about it. It's like the elephant in the room. But switching over to, say, like a glass container, or I have paperboard, cardboard containers that you can toss right into the compost pile after you're done. Those types of packaging are a little bit more expensive. They cut into your profit margin. In my opinion, it's much worth it. And I feel like if I start this trend now, I'll get other companies to start a trend and for people to request that type of packaging from other companies too. So that's where I feel like I stand with the community as a source of education, and to empower them, let them know that they can make a difference. They do make a difference every time they make a choice in the supermarket or in the store. They pick up a bottle of plastic versus a more sustainable option. And I also teach them how to make their own products. So that's, I think, empowering to them, because they get to make a product, see how easy it is to switch to all natural, and then use it for themselves. So that's where I stand on that.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing, Julie. And I think that's so great. I think so much of that, the plastic that we think about it's hard to think of ways that, we can not, we have to buy our soaps and whatnot. So how can we continue to be sustainable while still having to buy those things? I think that your dissertation soap and the kind of education aspect behind it is really important. So thank you for sharing and kind of keeping on that plastics. Macy, do you want to share a bit more about the way that you incorporate plastics into your art?
Sure, thank you. So as I said, my journey is more of a personal one, where I just suddenly realized, after living in places like Hawaii and San Diego and being around the ocean and the beaches, and just noticing just so much trash, and mostly in the form of plastic. And it just set into motion this passion, this desire to try to live as much as possible a plastic-free life. But as I'm sure many of the panelists know, it's a very difficult thing to do. Plastic is very pervasive, it's convenient. And I think, as Julie said, if we can just openly have a dialogue to talk about the big elephant, the big 3 elephants in the room, because there's 3 floating plastic islands in just our Pacific Ocean alone. If we can talk about this, then we can contact all our representatives, make demands with the companies that we love and support, and ask them to make these simple switches, and hopefully the products that we buy, the packaging that these companies purchase can be more affordable. But I raise awareness, and I believe I make an impact by showing my artwork to friends, family, the community. I've had a few art shows on campus, downtown Riverside, and just, it's an educational opportunity for me to talk about these problems that impacts everybody and everything. It's not just people, but it's animals, it's our oceans, it's our land. Microplastic is a huge problem, and even the experts don't really quite understand and nor grasp the magnitude of the problem. We're dealing with plastic that has been around since it was invented. What was it, like 50 years ago? So thinking about the future and what kind of a planet do we want to create for our children.
For sharing, Macy. And I think, you know, you've got Julie, who Julie really helps try and get rid of that plastic consumption at the beginning, but then that plastic that's out there, you're able to kind of bring in and use in different ways. And so it's great to be able to see the ways that our panelists are being able to attack this from a number of different sides. And so Eric, I'd love to hear more from you on kind of the ways. I know you, the water and plastics is another big piece of what you're doing. And so I'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of touched on this previously, but I mean, I think it was a culmination of just educating myself more on plastic, and very much also personal as well, how Water Boys came to be, along with my own personal sustainable journey. But I think for me, it became a lot more obvious when I moved to a huge city, living in New York City, you know, walking to the subway, walking to school and to class and to work, you know, just the trash full of like plastic cans. They weren't even properly recycled in the right bins, you know, just huge amounts of trash everywhere. It just kind of really put into perspective, like, wow, we have such a huge waste problem here going on, and, you know, globally, not even just in New York City. And so kind of looking at it more from a perspective, and I'll go a little bit more into this in terms of when we talk about creativity, but I kind of thought to myself, how can we make this a cultural shift? How can we really make people kind of come to this realization how big of an issue that this really is? And, you know, Water Boys came to be because we thought of it's easy to make someone do a sustainable behavior if it's almost kind of like requires no thinking, you know, it's almost kind of done for them. And so, you know, if we're providing a reusable water bottle for you and it's pre-filled with water, essentially a customer has no work to do other than just, you know, purchase the bottle, right? Or rent the bottle, sorry. And so we kind of really thought about putting the human and the customer first, like thinking about the behavioral implications on why it's hard for people to make sustainable choices in life. And so, you know, here we are today, and, you know, we're super excited. We've been, you know, piloting in schools in New York, and, you know, it's actually great to be reconnecting with UCR as well, because I mean, I think this is definitely something, you know, would be a good idea to also collaborate and bring also to West Coast schools as well. But super, super excited.
Cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what the process is? You kind of touched on it, but would folks then rent the water bottle when they're out and about and then just return it? And
yeah, absolutely. So this is like our prototype bottle. Eventually we want to actually emboss the bottle, and, you know, but in the back we have a QR code. So you know how with your iPhone you can actually scan QRs, and so through scanning the device with your phone, it essentially logs into our database, and so we're able to track people. So kind of think of like a sharing economy business model like Uber. Everyone's, you know, using a service for a certain allocated period of time, and so you register the bottle, and you're allowed to rent it out. It's already pre-filled. And you use it as many times as you'd like. Ideally, we have access in drop-off locations and convenient locations such as campuses. Right now, it really works in campuses because, you know, it's a centralized location. We really don't want to be having a drop-off location for this bottle being really far from where you're already commuting. And so, you know, you check it out for a certain period of time, and then you drop it off, and we do all the fulfillment for you, everything from sanitation to filling the water bottles. You know, there's also a huge perception, I think, and this also touches along with COVID, right? With this whole perception about reusables being like not sanitary because it could contain the virus. And so, you know, sanitation is something that's also really important to us as a brand, to reassure to our customers that this water is not only, you know, safe to drink, but that the bottle has been fulfilled and is safe for you to use as well.
That's great. That's a really, really cool concept, and I appreciate you for sharing.
Thank you.
I want to share with us a bit about your experiences working in the more kind of corporate-based world of sustainability, and on the flip side, also really looking at the way social justice overlaps with sustainability.
Yeah, so fortunately in my professional career, I've been able to engage with community kind of more through advocacy and with direct engagement on a project basis. So really what that looked like is, I was in charge of corporate social responsibility. So one, what are we doing around sustainability, environmental sustainability, but also what are we doing around social sustainability? How are we engaging with communities? And so one of the things that we worked on was doing a lot of advocacy, specifically with local governments like the city of Santa Monica, or the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, as they were working on their environmental plans. And not only advocating in terms of, what would be best in order for us as a business to move forward in a more environmental fashion, but really what's best for the community. And so really working as a stakeholder in those engagement opportunities. And then on a more personal, also business level, is really engagement with nonprofit organizations like USGBC LA. USGBC is the US Green Building Council, and there are local chapters. The national chapter does a lot of this work as well, but I was more involved in local chapters because I do think a lot of the work that needs to happen around sustainability, these are all global ideals and global concepts, but the work really needs to happen at the local level. So working with USGBC LA, I was able to work on what was called the Legacy Project. And what that was is effectively the board did some fundraising. We were able to give out grants from $10,000 to $20,000 to a community design sustainability project. And so we would lend them not only that, initial seed capital to get that project done, but the expertise of green building professionals that were part of this network to help bring that project to fruition. So it's their project. It meets the needs of that community. It meets the needs of folks who are at various social economic statuses. It also has to be publicly available and have an education option around sustainability or whatever other issues that organization is working on. One of my favorite projects was the Veggie Bus, which was basically an organization called CSG, Community Services Unlimited, took what was a now no longer working bus that they were using to move people from their eco farm, which is where they sustainable farming practices. They were moving people from communities that were effectively in food deserts to these local farms. That bus stopped working, but they didn't want to let that bus go, right? It's more waste. So they had this great idea to upscale it and make an outdoor classroom, a community center, a seed library, and it is now doing all of that. And when COVID hit, it served its function of being a hub for resilience, so people could charge their cell phones there. It's completely solar powered, so it's independent from the grid and can sustain that community in the event of emergency, similar to COVID. So it's these type of projects that really, for me, was the best way to engage with the community. It was one, not only providing education, but really providing people opportunity to be directly involved in what sustainability looked like for them.
Wow, thank you for sharing. I think that's coming at it from a very different perspective that sometimes we don't always think about, and that kind of broader scale community level approaching these sustainability initiatives. So thanks for sharing, Maya. Looking at, we've got alumni from all different fields that have been able to approach this topic from a number of different ways. I'd love to start hearing about, how did your degree from UCR help you get into the business of sustainability? Obviously, some of you, it was very relevant, environmental science. But at the same time, we've got Eric in marketing who probably had to make a jump to be able to connect those two. And so I'd love to hear how you were able to utilize the degree that you got from UCR and the experiences you got at UCR into a lot of the great work that you're doing now. And so, Eric, I think you went ahead and unmuted yourself. So let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think, UCR has a really great business program, shout out UCR. I think anytime you want to run a business, it's really, important that you understand the fundamentals, understanding business, understand, finance, understanding marketing, understanding, all aspects of business. And so, it's something, of course, that you can learn on your own, but I think it's really great. I think it's a great choice for all of you, and even if you're not, studying in business specifically, but at least for me, really understanding the process of, how to market a product, how to figure out the right price point, how to figure out, vendors and cost analysis. All of that is all the number crunching, along with the cultural aspect. I think I really gravitated towards marketing as a specialization within the business program. Because, you're essentially selling an idea, you're selling a product, but you're also selling a culture and you're selling a movement. And that's something that's really important to us as a brand, especially that, we're sustainability focused. We really want to be more inclusive as a brand. We don't want to be kind of typecasted as, we're zero waster or someone that's just trying to be a perfect type of sustainability advocate. I think we want to mass market our brand to everybody and be inclusive of everyone to be part of the sustainability movement.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense given, there's a lot of folks like myself who may not truly understand. And so that branding and that marketing is really important to be able to help understand what those products are and what the impact is. So thank you for sharing. Julie, Julie and Maya both kind of have that background in environmental science. So would you like to, we'll start with Julie and then Maya can chat a bit about the way that you've been able to directly kind of use that experience in your work.
Yeah, well, definitely being an environmental science major, both with my undergrad and my graduate degree, just learned so much about water quality and soil health, air quality, and what we're doing, the anthropogenic impact on the environment is just, it's overwhelming actually. Like I think it's hard to even really grasp even when you're learning about it every day. So knowing that, it just only made sense to try to incorporate that in my life and my business, my career. I think with my products, I feel like a very strong sense of responsibility towards the environment. And I feel like I wouldn't even be able to allow myself to make decisions that would, I felt were harmful to the environment because of everything that I know from my classes, my coursework. Even internships that I did through UCR had a very strong impact for me. I did a year-long internship as an environmental planner through the Santa Ana Watershed Protection Agency through UCR. And learning about how much goes into our local water systems was hands down the main reason why I talk about it to this day. Every shower that you take really makes a difference because learning about the Santa Ana River, that's a river nearby here in Riverside. Also just the lakes around us, like Big Bear Lake, Lake Arrowhead. I did all of they call them TDMLs, but they're basically reports that show the health of that water body, that water system. And running all those reports and seeing how much just like fertilizing our front yard can affect the health of Big Bear, Big Bear Lake. Seeing how one person's impact, multiply that by 20, 50, 100, or 1,000, it makes a very big difference. So I think that I took all of that and I try to incorporate that in my company where I tell them every time they take a shower, it's a chance to make a difference. But really it's because the water that they're using is going right to a treatment plant right next to them, and it's likely being discharged into the water body closest to them or directly into the ocean. And there are definitely some things that cannot be removed from the water. So a lot of people think that the water's treated, everything's taken out, but it's not true. There are plastics that get broken down, there's fragrances, there's dyes, even drugs that we take that can't be removed because the molecule is so small, it can't pass through the sieves that treat the water. So it goes through a series of treatments, and the last treatment that they do still can't capture everything, and it still gets discharged because they have to put it somewhere. They can't keep all that water, all that sewage water and gray water. So everything that I feel I have learned, I definitely directly use in my company, and educating people on understanding what raw ingredients I should be using and should not be using in my products. So knowing what can be treated out and what cannot be treated out is huge for me, especially on the chemistry side.
Oh, I'm sure. Thanks for sharing. I think, yeah, so many things you mentioned I didn't know, and I'm going to be even myself so much more aware now, even when I take a shower, of the way in which the water I'm using is going back into the environment. So I'm glad that you were able to, not only with your degree, get that experience, but also the different experiences at UCR with internships and stuff. And so I'm really glad to hear that. Maya, do you have similar thoughts coming from a similar background as Julie, and the way you've been able to utilize that in your?
I second so much of what Julie says. It was really being able to get that full experience, and really what really drew me to environmental science, because I went in as a biology major and realized that wasn't enough for me when I really wanted to focus more on sustainability. And when I switched to environmental science, it was like the world opened up, and it was bittersweet, because it is daunting and scary to really, you know, be able to study so deeply what's wrong with the world and kind of all the what's seemingly insurmountable challenges we have. But it was also very encouraging to just see that, you know, there were so many different ways to come at these problems. And I think it's funny actually because my first lab experience at UCR was in the soil science department, and it was with Dr. Parker. And it was that experience that got me thinking about soil. And so I, you know, fast forward years later, working corporate, not really focused on soil, again, part of legacy projects, testing out projects. I was always so excited when anybody had a RFP that had soil focus because it's so critical. You don't realize how much impact it has on our water systems and our health overall. So it's those things, those experiences that you see are really in that came along with the environmental science degree that I more than appreciate. And I also, my concentration ended up being social sciences, which for me was the most eye-opening piece of that degree, is really being able to articulate and understand and share that cost-benefit analysis that happens with sustainability. What we're talking about with sustainability is making use of what we already have and being able to showcase to people that they can, you know, live a quality life with some sacrifices, which is what we do every single day. We sacrifice things to enjoy other things. So being able to extrapolate that out and see what we're doing in the sustainability field was critical.
Great, thanks for sharing, Maya. And it's great to hear that, you know, you and Julie had similar experiences and takeaways from your experiences at UCR. Macy, do you have thoughts on the ways that your degree kind of helped shape the way that you view your art and the ways that you're approaching it?
Sure. So I was an art major for most of my undergrad, but then last minute, pretty much I switched because I didn't like being graded, my art being graded. So I switched to anthropology. So I would say, you know, to sum up my personal experience in that is I was able to find a way to make something, turn kind of something ugly, you know, this dependency on plastic, into something beautiful. So taking my art training and figuring out some way to kind of blend artistic creativity with a lens on human behavior. And, you know, plastics, as we're all saying, is a big part of our modern society. And so I actually have something put up especially for the session today, but this is just one of my pieces. And it's basically, you know, like I said, plastic bags and acrylic on canvas. So that's really all that's going into my work. And so I've been trying an experiment for almost a decade now of how much plastic am I consuming? And so I found myself hoarding lots of plastic because I challenge each and every one of you to try and do that, and you'll realize how much plastic you're consuming and how much it's just, our society is wrapped in plastic. And unfortunately, a lot of it takes, I mean, there's a lot of studies and statistics out there, but it takes anywhere from 500 to 1,000 years for plastic to degrade, if at all. So I'm just trying to see how creatively, how can I turn these ugly bits of plastic into something beautiful, and hopefully, like I was saying, encourage some kind of dialogue, and hopefully encourage just regular people to consider changing their habits in some small way each and every day.
Perfect, and thank you for sharing your art. It's really beautiful and a really great piece behind you. We actually got a question in for you, asking if you displayed your art made from recycled plastic at the Alumni and Visitors Center.
That was me.
If so, they said it was beautiful. Whoever submitted the question.
It was a huge honor for me it was very emotional for me to be able to bring my art to campus.
Cool.
Thank you.
I hope to be able to see it in person one day once we are able to return to being in each other's presence. Thanks again, Macy, and all of you for sharing. It's really great to hear how your experiences at UCR were able to kind of shape the roles and the journeys that you've all gone through since leaving campus, or like maybe not leaving campus. And so one thing I think a lot of you touched on that I'd love to hear more about is obviously with COVID-19, a lot of how we operate is completely changed. And so assuming that that has completely changed the way that we are able to be sustainable and has changed the way that we look at our use of plastics, or even like Eric mentioned with sanitization. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the pandemic has changed sustainability initiatives. Has it made it harder? And also, how have you worked or seen others work to continue to be sustainable when you're in a stay-at-home order, when you can't go out and do the things that you normally would be able to do? And so, Eric, I'd love to hear from you first, because you kind of started touching on it a bit about, sanitation is a huge piece of it. And so I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on the way that COVID has changed sustainability.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, an ongoing challenge. And I think if anything, it's a little bit harder now, at least in New York. We were supposed to have the reusable bag. That's already been happening here in California, right? Where, now you're forced, or not forced, but there's a little bit of an incentive to bring a reusable bag to the grocery store. So we were supposed to have that going on in March, but due to COVID, it got pushed back until June, and it's still kind of, up in the air, even things like composting. So then, it really, again, boils down back to that a lot of it still has to do with perception that even though scientists have proven that, there's not a higher likelihood of getting COVID as a result of using reusable materials. And so, we have some work to do. However, never underestimate, I encourage you all to not let that hold you back. I just went to Trader Joe's the other day, and, they made me bag everything myself, even though I brought my reusables. But I was like, that's totally fine for me. Like, I don't need someone to, put away my groceries in my bag for me. And, you see, it's great to see businesses adapt to that. And they had like a huge table in the front of their store to allow customers to, bag their own things if they bring a reusable. So, never underestimate, we, be more educated on, definitely as policy and more, we have some challenges with our administration currently, but, there's never underestimate the power that you as an individual have and the difference that you can make as an individual.
Thanks for sharing, Eric. I think, those are things I never even would have thought of. And so I appreciate you sharing. And it's definitely unfortunate to see the way that COVID's impacted it, but it's also great to be able to hear some of the ways to continue this fight, even with everything that we're going through.
Yeah.
Maya, would you like to speak up a bit? I know you mentioned a bit about the community aspect and the way that it's kind of impacted it. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on the way that COVID has changed sustainability.
Yeah, I think, on the face of it, it's definitely made it a bit easier for folks to default back to old habits. But I think that's why we need folks like Eric, who are in marketing and storytelling, to really help amplify the story and the facts over the rhetoric that can mislead people. There's multiple stories out, news articles recently that basically says, reusables aren't necessarily going to increase your likelihood of getting it. But also, it is true that plastics do play a big role in sanitation and public health. So I think we just need to be more mindful and cognizant of how we're using plastics, right? We're not saying plastics are inherently wrong, but we're at a point where we're frivolously using them. And so we need to be very cognizant of how we're using them and making sure we're only using them in applications where they're necessary. And so I think that's something that can definitely come out of this, is continuing that conversation, pushing that conversation, especially as I think we should also be aware in this moment, those communities that are most directly impacted by the excessive plastics in our waterways, excessive plastics that are being processed in unhealthful ways, are communities of color typically. Those are the communities that are going to bear the brunt of the environmental ills of these plastics. So we really need to be mindful of how we continue to work with these materials. So I would say that it is going to present some challenges in the near future as we work to undo the rhetoric that can be out there. But I think it really provides an opportunity to really look at the full scope of what's happening in the world and how we're using plastics. I think I forget who said it, forgive me, I think it was Julie, but basically, you know, we've been working with plastic now for 50 years, and we're at a point where we don't need to produce any new plastics. We could really collect and reutilize what's already out there. And I think that's something that really needs to move forward, these concepts. But again, just being that it is really communities of color, lower economically advantaged communities that are going to bear the brunt of these at this point, pollutants, we really need to be mindful about how we move forward in their use and be very strategic about how we continue to engage with it.
Thanks for sharing, Maya. And yeah, I think, you know, we've all seen a lot of the stats of how COVID itself is disproportionately affecting community of color. And so then you look at the way that this is also contributing to so many of the challenges that these communities face. And so I think that you bring up some really great points. Macy, do you have any thoughts on the way that it's impacted sustainability initiatives?
Well, I would say that, like many of us were saying before, that people tend to equate plastics with being more sanitary, it's convenient, and that may be true in some cases, but I would echo what Maya was saying. We need to be a lot more critical about how we're applying plastic and not just go straight to it, you know, once things get complicated. I think we're an intelligent species, I hope, and think and believe that there are better ways, there are other ways, and I think we need to stop scaring people into believing things that just aren't true. So I think the media plays a big role in that, and certain politicians. And so I think it's like Eric was saying, we have the power to vote with our dollars and make some real changes with the choices that we make. And again, we have to think about the children. I mean, what world are we going to give them if we keep taking like this?
Absolutely. Maya has one more thing to add as well, so I'll pass it back to her and then we'll give Julie a chance to speak.
Thanks. Sorry, I just realized also, I really think something we need to talk about as we have these conversations is the fact that we're really not seeing the full cost of plastics, right? Plastics seem so cheap to us. That's why it's so convenient, so easy, but we're not really paying the full cost of them. And I think that's, again, just, you know, economic systems being what they are. But we really need to talk about the public health, the environmental health, all of these things. If we really look at that full cost, programs like Eric's really start to help us realize that full cost. And so it might seem more expensive to have a reusable bottle, but it's really not when we talk about what we're paying in medical bills, what we're paying in public health bills. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was a really great point to add on, Maya. Thank you. Julie, your thoughts?
You guys have touched on so many things that I was already thinking. I think the first thing I noticed was the same thing that Eric noticed, is that I'm like steadfast, you know, bag reuser. I have my grocery bags, and I brought them in dutifully into the store to use, and was looked at like I was carrying the plague in my bags. So I think that was the first thing I noticed was, you know, having to switch over to bagging my own groceries, which is no problem. I'm happy to bag my own groceries if I can, you know, try to reduce that plastic. Also, I think I noticed locally that they stopped charging for plastic bags at grocery stores. So they would provide a free plastic bag, and that's like a reversal of things, which is a little saddening. You know, you could still bring in your own bag. You just have to bag your own groceries, no big deal. Another thing that I've noticed is a reversal back to having bottled water at things like events or stores, or where they're offering like anything that's complimentary. They've taken away anything that's like from a water pitcher or it will be handled by too many people, and they've switched to little plastic bottles. And even things like pastries, donuts, I've even seen fruits individually packaged in little plastic bags. So that was like, oh, this is different. Like, it's this idea that if you've encapsulated it in plastic, somehow it is more sanitary. It may or may not be, you know, depending on who handled the product before they put it in the plastic. Or, I mean, I think that what they want to do is give the appearance that it is a little bit more clean with the extra use of plastic. So that's something that I've noticed. And then also personally, as far as the business side, I've noticed that it's a lot easier and cheaper to get a hold of plastic containers than it is aluminum. Like I use aluminum or glass, preferably for containers. So when I started to make hand sanitizers, everyone was asking if they could purchase hand sanitizer. It was making, a hard decision to really just still hold steadfast to not providing plastic bottles. And then it was really difficult to source a more sustainable bottle in that time of need, and everybody panicking and like not being able to get the materials or even just have them delivered. Shipping was slowed down by several weeks. So as a company owner, it was just my resolve really to keep continuing to not offer plastic and to just like be resolute in my decision on that and how would it affect, the environment. But I've noticed that a lot of other companies have, gone back to the plastic and in my opinion, probably, excessive use of plastic, really, of you don't need to wrap up an apple in plastic, for instance. So that's one thing that I've noticed. And I think that what we can do is just keep the conversation going like this. What we're doing right now is just, let's keep this conversation going. Yes, there are other things going on in the world, but this is also a very important topic. And we need to keep going and still know that this is also a matter of public health that we're talking about. The reduce of plastics is also a public health concern. And just like Maya mentioned, it does impact communities that are lower income or more at a disadvantage because they bear the brunt of the pollution. So.
Thank you for sharing, Julie, and I really appreciate all of your thoughts on the impact COVID has had on sustainability. And I definitely can see where a lot of those things have come into play. I definitely, the more you say it, I'm like, yes, I've seen so much more plastic wrap things and whatnot since. So I think it's important to be able to have these conversations and continue to be aware of the way that we're using these products. So a lot of you have talked about a lot of really cool and creative ways that you've been able to be really sustainable. And so I'd love to know, what helps stimulate your creative side for some of you that, have created products and created art or, are working with some really cool projects. What really kind of stimulates that creative side for you and has helped you be able to find new and innovative ways to kind of tackle these problems? Macy, do you want to share with us first as the artist in the group?
I think we're all artists and creators of our own lives, but I would say art runs deep in my family. We're all creative in our own ways. For me, it happened about 5 or so-ish years ago that, like I was kind of saying earlier, how do I make art that's meaningful, that is not just fun or pretty to look at, but there's actually meaning behind it, and meaning that addresses a really big concern or important concern to myself and what I would hope for many people. So I think once I discovered that passion, it just kind of snowballed into other things like, not beyond plastics, but the plight of the bees, for example, global climate change. It just ricocheted into other important areas that we should all be concerned about. I actually also had a piece where I created a big plywood made out of plastic, where I was weaving plastic to form like little beehives, and it was titled Dis-ease. So incorporating that plastic into other ways to also help illustrate another area where we should be concerned about, because if we have no more bees, then we have no more food. So I think conservation efforts, sustainability efforts, no matter if we're in that field or not professionally, they should all be concerns for everyone.
Thank you, Macy. Julie, wrapping your soap in dissertation, pages is super unique in itself. So I'd love to hear more about what really stimulates your creative side. Oh, hold on. Looks like you're muted.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
I've always had a lot of hobbies. It's funny, like, I love how Macy said that we're all creators, we're all creative, because I was already really into a lot of hobbies and creativity before I started my company. I would sew and bake and garden and all of that. As far as like the creative side, I think I just try to think about what's fun for people. Like I think about self-care a lot, topics of mental health. Actually, I work with a lot of mental health initiatives locally, and self-care, doing something that's very kind to yourself, or getting a product that's just for you or special, and then also knowing that it's not harming the environment, that you're actually doing something good for the world while you're taking care of yourself. So I just try to find different things that I think would be inspiring to people that have meaning, a deeper meaning, like self-care, how that's linked with mental health issues. I also just think about how I can use science and chemistry in just really fun ways, like outside of the box, something that you wouldn't do in a normal chemistry lab. When I do my workshops, they're all STEM-based. I don't dummy down any of the science. You learn actual chemical equations sometimes, or the actual chemistry behind a bath bomb, something really simple, but you're learning what type of reaction it is. Is it exothermic, endothermic? So bringing back some of the chemistry, but in a fun way. I just like to get people to nerd out. So just like Macy said, everybody's has a creativity side. I also tell people that everybody's a scientist and they just don't know it yet.
I love that. I want to join one of these workshops at some point. They sound very fun.
Please come.
We'll pass it off to Eric and Maya in a second. I did just remind folks that you can submit any questions that you have for our panelists at the chat below. So submit any of those questions you have and we'll try and get to them in just a minute. But Eric, what would you say is what really stimulates your creative side?
Yeah, I think Julie and Macy hit the nail on the head, right? I think we all intuitively have a creativity, and it's just a matter, of discovering, what that creative outlet is. At least for me personally, being a business major, I was always kind of craving, my master's education to be something a little bit more creative focused. And, that's when I got into kind of design thinking, and design thinking is a discipline that I would highly encourage, everyone to look into. But it's essentially a brainstorm exercise that a lot of consulting companies are doing now. And it's essentially human-centered design, so putting humans first. And so problem solving and looking at everything from policy to business innovation from the perspective of what human inconvenience or human pain point or challenge is my business or is my policy solving. And so I think that's a fundamental question, regardless of what field you're in or what practice you in your day-to-day job, thinking about what are the implications of my actions and what solution, but with the human first. And so I think that's, kind of a realm of thinking that helps, definitely the Water Boys as a team. We do a lot of design sprints and business meetings in the realm of, not just coming with, concepts ready, but actually doing a brainstorming together. I think, we're seeing a shift in consulting and business, getting everybody, not seeing, different departments as siloed, but seeing everything as a collaborative process. And so that's definitely something how I try to stimulate my creative side. Also, constantly learning. I like going on websites like Fast Company, IDEO. Those are really good design, consulting, management consulting blogs, that really blend that business, but also creativity and design. And they have a lot of really great resources for different practices that you could be implementing in your own businesses as well. But that's definitely, what I kind of do to try to be creative all the time.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Eric. Maya, do you have thoughts to add of your creative side?
Thankfully, they all pretty much said it. I think, yeah, I think honestly are all creative, and I would just say kind of in a business setting, really, even if it doesn't feel artsy, you know, that's not the only way to be creative. Really thinking of alternatives to the status quo is the best way to be creative, especially if you're, in my experience, trying to be an introvert or entrepreneur, is really to come to people with new ways, being open to have that exchange, that dialogue, to expand on that creativity, but really being able to you know, find new ways to get to the solutions you're looking for.
Great, thanks for sharing. I think that's really important because I think, yeah, so much we think of creative as artists like Macy, but at the same time, there's a lot of ways to be creative, and you've got to be creative in those corporate settings and those other areas. So I'm really appreciative of you sharing that. We are getting down to our last few minutes, so we're going to go through and ask our panelists to share, you know, what advice would you give to someone that wants to be more sustainable but may not have a lot of knowledge of where to begin. And so we'll have our panelists share, you know, their biggest advice to our participants of ways that they can be sustainable at home or in their profession or whatnot, however our panelists want to take it. And so I don't know if anyone wants to go first, if anyone has their advice right off the top of their head. I don't want to throw anyone out there. Julie's got hers, so we'll pass it to Julie. Julie doesn't want anyone to take hers.
I'm probably going to say what everybody else is already thinking. But I think just knowing the extent of, you know, how big our plastic problem is and how big sustainability is, that it can be really overwhelming, and you think that maybe you're not, as one person, going to make that much of a difference by your individual choices. But I would suggest saying, don't try to take it all on at once. That it's probably not realistic that you change everything in your life in one day to no plastic, and that to try to be, you know, reasonable with yourself and maybe set a goal like, I'm going to reduce, you know, a percentage, or I'm going to take one product a month and really look at my cabinet, my personal care use, or my kitchen, or wherever you think you're using plastics, and just try to take one thing at a time, you know, one product every month, and just go down the line of what you can do, and just talk to other people about what you're doing too. So try to encourage like your friends and your family, like, hey mom, or your brother or your sister, like, hey, I got you, you know, a reusable water bottle so that you can use this now instead of always having you know, the plastic water bottles. So my advice would be not to take it all on at once, that might not be realistic, but just change one thing at a time, you know, order the water boys water. Instead of picking up that, you know, you have a choice when you're at the machine, like, do I get that Aquafina water bottle, or do I choose, like, you know, the water boys? Like, making just some simple choices. That would be my advice.
Thank you. I think that's great advice. Eric, Macy, or Maya, anyone want to go next? Eric, I think, is gonna go next for us.
Yeah, I think, Julie, you hit it, you know, again, right on, spot on. You know, I think there's 3 fundamental questions we need to ask ourselves, you know, when beginning our own sustainability journey, right? It's a journey, no one's perfect. You know, the first thing I would ask myself is why? You know, why do I want to be sustainable? I think it's really important that we really drive to the ethos and really make it personable for us to kind of, you know, just as, you know, if you're doing a diet or if you're doing any kind of movement, you need to kind of understand the why. I think that's really important that a lot of us kind of forget about. The next question I would ask is, you know, the what. You know, Julie, you mentioned sustainability is just so complex. There's so many elements to it. You know, it's important to know the why so that, you know, what specific part of sustainability are you really passionate about? You know, is it plastic? Is it pollution? You know, which one of those elements really, you know, kind of hits at home for you? I think, you know, not really feeling pressured to be an expert in everything, but really understanding and starting small on one focus and kind of building on from there. The last question I would ask is how. How can I make a difference? How can I make a difference within plastic waste, for example? You know, really looking at the organizations that you all are part of in school. If you're in a fraternity, you know, I was in a fraternity at UCR, you know, starting within the organizations that you're in or your job, you have a huge opportunity to make an impact, you know, on a smaller scale at a local level from the places that you're working at and are a part of.
Macy, would you like to?
Sure.
Okay.
To everything, ditto on everything everyone just said, but also what Eric just touched on, supporting small local businesses. Like Eric and Julie, they're doing amazing things in the realm of sustainability. And so, again, voting with your dollars, and you're helping to support those small mom and pop shops. You don't always have to go on Amazon because it's convenient. Maybe spend a little more and get it local. So that's my last tidbit.
I love it, Macy. Maya, your parting advice for our participants today.
Again, they made it easy because they all basically, they touched on it. I would just say, to build on that, I think what everyone alluded to and what I tell people all the time is that really you are constantly voting or showing your priorities with your dollars and your time. So do as they've said, really be mindful of where you're putting your money, and definitely start small and make the small changes you can afford and that makes sense for you. But also be really cognizant of where you're putting your time. What you put your time into is effectively you voting for that is a priority for you. So I would say with your time, as much as possible, advocacy. I think we underestimate how impactful and powerful we are as individuals in our political system. So I think, as was said, don't think just because you're one person, your voice doesn't matter, your input doesn't matter. Really lending your voice whenever you can, whenever you have that ability, to advocacy issues, letting folks know what you value and what's important, and giving, 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, all of these things add up. So really be mindful of where you put your time and energy. And I know it's exhaustive to do the research and make sure what you're really doing is really sustainable. But again, taking a little bit of time and just, start small, it's going to really help you move forward.
Great. I love all the advice, and it's, even myself not being from this realm, it's really great to hear and helpful in knowing even where to start, and knowing that it can be overwhelming, but that there's little things to kind of start doing. And I think, shopping local is a big one, especially having two folks here that have been able to kind of figure that out on their own and creating their own products. And so appreciate all of your advice, and appreciate all of you for joining us today. A huge shout out to our panelists for joining us and sharing their expertise. I know I learned a lot, and I hope all of you learned a lot as well, and that you were able to really understand the ways in which our actions, and the ways that these products are impacting our planet, and the way that COVID is even more so impacting it. And so I think we were able to learn a lot from them, and appreciate their insights, and think that this industry insights was a great time. We have a lot of other great events coming up in the next month or so. And so we hope that you're able to join us for some of these other events. In regards to industry insights, we've got a civic engagement one coming up on the 21st, where we'll be able to hear from some UCR alumni that are lending their voices to shape state and federal policy, and making impacts in their local communities. And so we hope you are able to join us to hear from some really great alum in that area. We have a Highlander Welcome. So historically, our Highlander Welcomes are an opportunity for our regional chapters to welcome our recent graduates to the area. However, due to COVID, we've been able to move them online and open it up to anyone that'd like to join, whether it's alumni, students, or staff. And the chapters are able to focus in on a specific area. And so the OC, the Orange County chapter, is looking at social media as a way to market yourself for a potential job. And so we've got a few alumni that are going to be able to share with us their experiences working either personally on really building their brand, or working at different companies such as Snapchat, et cetera, that have been able to help them understand what that looks like. And then we also have another industry insights in August on the 18th, looking at entrepreneurial skills and how alumni that may not consider them entrepreneurs can hone in on some of those entrepreneurial skills that are translatable. All these events will begin at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we hope that you're able to join us for some of them. But beyond that, we also have a lot of other resources for our alumni at alumni.ucr.edu/career services. On there, we have a lot of different resources for you all to learn about in regards to resumes or cover letters or whatnot. So we really hope that you're able to find us as a great resource for you, whether it be with specific career advice or just learning about different industries like sustainability today. And so we really, again, thank you all, and a huge thank you to our panelists for joining us today. I hope you all have a great night, and go Highlanders.